Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to speak about this amendment to the 2017 NDAA. Since taking office in 2009, President Obama's administration has forced its green energy agenda on the American people despite the devastating costs. For our military, this means a mandate to purchase renewable energy and to incorporate climate change into almost every aspect of training, regardless of cost or efficiency. As you might imagine, these mandates result in some absurd wastes of money. Every cent spent by the Department of Defense on the incorporation of the administration's climate change agenda is a cent lost for the defense of the American people. The U.S. military should be focused on defending American citizens, not serving as a playground for the green energy movement. Moreover, spending the American people's tax dollars on crony capitalism is despicable. Renewable energy should be free to compete in the energy marketplace. American families shouldn't be asked to subsidize costly, inefficient, and uncompetitive green energy with their hard-earned tax dollars. My amendment ends this wasteful and dangerous practice. It prohibits renewable energy mandates placed on the Department of Defense and ensures that every unit of energy our military purchases is the most cost-effective option available. I ask for support on this amendment and reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Colorado reserves. What purpose? The gentleman from Washington seek recognition.
Claim the time in opposition.
The gentleman is recognized for 5
and
minutes.
I yield 1 minute to the gentlewoman from New York, Ms. Stefanik.
The gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
I stand today opposed to this amendment. As the representative of Fort Drum, an Army post that is 100% energy independent and self-sustainable, relying solely on biomass energy. Unfortunately, this amendment would impede military facilities like Drum from continuing to pursue energy solutions that enhance national security, training capabilities, and operational flexibility. Fort Drum and the North Country serve as models for operating government facilities more efficiently, where ReEnergy, our alternative energy partner, positively affects the Army and has created 300+ jobs throughout our community. Providing our military with resilient energy ensures our service members remain able to respond to any threat at any time. DoD's use of alternative energy strengthens their ability to conduct combat operations, humanitarian response, and protects our national security. I urge my colleagues to vote no on this amendment, which would have detrimental effects on alternative energy technologies that make our troops safer, increase combat effectiveness, and severely undercut programs like those at Fort Drum. I yield back.
Gentleman from Washington, reserve. Gentleman from Washington, reserve. Gentleman from Colorado is recognized.
Reserved.
Gentleman from Colorado reserves. Gentleman from Washington.
I yield 1.5 minutes to the gentleman from California, a member of the Armed Services Committee, Mr. Peters.
Gentleman from California is recognized for 1.5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am also opposed to this amendment. The DoD's employment of alternative energy is not about hugging trees. It's about improving our mission capabilities and saving lives. The military's investments in alternative energy technologies not only make our troops safer and increase combat effectiveness, they also reap government energy savings. Renewable energy systems reduce our reliance on foreign oil and have saved lives by cutting down on refueling trips in the battlefields. Around 3,000 American soldiers were killed or wounded in Afghanistan while protecting fuel convoys. The military is already adopting cutting-edge renewable energy technologies like transportable solar panels and backpacks used by Marines to generate electricity. Last August, I was at Naval Base Coronado when the Navy signed the largest renewable energy purchase by the federal government in history. The project will provide 210 megawatts of energy at an estimating savings of $90 million over the length of the contract. And since 2009, the department estimates that they've saved over $1 billion through renewable energy projects on installations. As we consider how to allocate the limited resources we have to support our service members and keep Americans safe, it's counterproductive at best to prohibit the military from using funds on cost-saving alternative sources of energy and redirecting it toward mission priorities. A 21st century military with the capability to counter new and dynamic threats cannot be powered by the energy of yesterday. I strongly oppose this amendment and I urge my colleagues to join me in opposition. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Gentleman from California yields back. Gentleman from Washington reserves. Gentleman from Colorado.
Mr. Chair, I appreciate the gentleman's support of this amendment and not opposition to this amendment. This amendment simply says that the military must determine the most cost-effective method. It does not ban renewables at all. And with that, I reserve.
Gentleman from Colorado reserves. Gentleman from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from New York, Mr. Gibson.
The gentleman from New York is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank the ranking member. Appreciate his leadership. I'm sure that the gentleman from Colorado has the best intentions. And, you know, with respect, I ask him to withdraw the amendment because it's very problematical as it's currently worded, prohibiting the reduction of energy consumption. I mean, this is important not only in terms of savings itself, but quite candidly for saving lives. You know, after 4 combat tours in Iraq, you know, we found any way possible to reduce the amount of convoys to go forward into our most forward positions and outposts because we knew every time that we were on the road, we could be at risk. We could lose lives. So I appreciate the effort to save money. And I think that if the gentleman withdraws the amendment and works with the committee, I'm sure that we can find a way to move forward on that score. But as Ms. Stefanik mentioned, you know, her post at Fort Drum really is reliant on or certainly benefiting from this biomass endeavor that's right there at Fort Drum. So I want to thank Mr. Smith for yielding me time and certainly respect the gentleman who offered the amendment. Thanks, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Washington still reserves. Gentleman from Colorado.
Reserves.
Gentleman from Colorado reserves. Gentleman from Washington.
I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Minnesota, Mr. Walz.
Gentleman from Minnesota is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I join my colleagues, national security experts, military leaders, and America's energy producers in strong opposition to this amendment. The Department of Defense use of alternative energy has accelerated in recent years and strengthened the military's ability to conduct combat operations, humanitarian response, and homeland defense. In short, it has improved the readiness of the armed forces to protect freedom overseas. DoD is the largest consumer of energy in the world, 117 million barrels of oil. Every 25-cent increase in a gallon of gas costs $1 billion to the American taxpayers and $1 billion less to the troops. DoD's fuel costs from 2005 to 2011 were so volatile, the cost went from $4.5 billion to $17.3 billion, even though we reduced our usage by 4%. An example of this, the U.S. Pacific Fleet in 2012 faced a $200 million budget gap that had to be filled by taking money from elsewhere because of rising fuel costs. This willingness to not look at all American homegrown energy and security is simply wrong-headed. And the idea that it costs more to do this, it costs $83 billion more to protect shipping lanes of oil coming from overseas. I ask my colleagues to resist this amendment.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from Washington reserves. Gentleman from Colorado
Reserves.
is reserved. Gentleman from Washington has 30 seconds.
Thank you. I'll yield myself the balance of the time.
Gentleman is
and
recognized.
agree with my colleagues, all of whom, you know, 2 of whom, actually 3 of whom have served in the military, and understand the need for this. This is an investment. This is an investment in alternatives. If we are tied to oil, tied to fossil fuels, and have no alternative, now, right now, they're cheap. But then they go up in cost, and they're also far more difficult to get into the field, as Mr. Gibson pointed out. This is an investment to give us the alternatives that we need. Nothing is more important to the success of a military, past the people who serve, than the ability to get the fuel they need, whatever form it comes in. This is an investment in developing much-needed alternatives.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from Colorado.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The fact that this amendment requires the military to choose the most cost-effective energy source allows the military to spend its money on those priorities other than energy. So I would ask my colleagues to support this amendment, and I yield back the remainder of my time.